In this video, we're going to look at norms, laws, and institutions. Humanity is a team sport. We are always interacting with one another. And in order for that interaction to be seamless and to work, we need to know what's expected. We need to know what's expected of us in terms of behavior, and we also need to be able to predict with some certainty how others are going to act. That's really what human society boils down to. According to Ludwig von Mises, he describes it as a system of coordinated action. We all coordinate our actions together. We want to know what's expected of us and how others are going to act. Without something to bring order to the chaos, life will be pretty unpleasant, as Thomas Hobbes describes it. Nasty, brutish, in short. We need some kind of system that'll coordinate action. And for human societies, we are generally governed by a collection of written and unwritten rules to help bring some order to human interaction. Let's illustrate with an example. Let's say you're waiting in line for your morning coffee. Maybe it's Tim Hortons, maybe it's Starbucks, and you're patiently waiting, you're on your way to work, but someone bursts into the store, strolls up to the counter, and cuts right into the front of the line and tries to order. How do you react to that? Is this expected? Is it unexpected? Well, generally, the people in line, and yourself included, might be upset because in sort of Anglo-American societies like Canada, there is a norm, an expectation that we don't do that. When you're waiting for service at a commercial outlet, in this case a cafe, you wait in line. There is a norm that says you wait your turn and you don't cut in line. That's an unwritten rule, and that's exactly what a norm is. It's an unwritten rule that is self-enforcing. Everybody knows the norm. Everybody knows it to wait their turn and not to cut in line. Now, when someone does violate that norm, there's no police force. There's nobody that's going to come and arrest the person for cutting in line because it's not breaking any law. But rather, it's a behavioral expectation, and it'll be enforced internally within the community. And so that might involve people yelling. People might accost the line cutter. They might physically remove them from the line. They might assault them. There might even be whistleblowers that draw the behavior to the attention of the barista and try to ensure that that person doesn't get service. This is an example of a norm. It's an unwritten rule that governs human behavior. Waiting in line for your coffee. We probably encounter lots of different norms like that every day. Unwritten rules. Another example where we might encounter one. Let's say you're in a rural area, maybe a county fair or a rock concert, and the parking lot is just a big dirt road. It's not an organized parking lot like a Costco or a Walmart, but rather it's just dirt. And you're driving around looking for a parking spot, and you approach another vehicle. What do? Well, generally, most cars will just veer to the right, and that will avoid any collision. We have a norm in North America that says drive on the right. And in a setting like this, without any lines delineated or traffic lanes, most people would know it's a self-enforcing norm that you drive on the right. And that would emerge. There wouldn't be a traffic cop. There would not, again, no lines on the ground. The norm would emerge. Everyone would just know to do the thing. Is that going to work all the time? Are norms enough in certain situations? Perhaps on busy highways like the 401, we could just rely on a norm that says everybody should drive on the right, and that's good enough. But we don't, because that's too big of a risk to take. There's lots of public safety implications, and many people might not be aware of the norm, given that Toronto is a big tourist city. So we don't rely on norms. We have laws that say drive on the right side of the road. Sometimes norms are not enough, and you need laws. Laws are formal systems that regulate the conduct of a community. Instead of relying on internal enforcement, like whistleblowers or community pressure, there's an external enforcement actor that enforces the laws, in this case, a police force. And to ensure compliance, there is a threat, a coercive threat. That might be a fine, it might be jail time, it might be just seizure of the vehicle. But in any case, where norms aren't sufficient, we use laws to govern human behavior. Now, the collection of things that govern human interaction, the formal rules and laws, the informal norms, we call these collectively institutions. They take a lot of different forms. There's formal legal codes, there are customs, there are traditions, there are even constitutions. All of these things collectively in our society establish the rules of the game. And that's really what institutions are. Institutions are the collection of formal and informal rules that provide the rules of the game. They tell us how to act in certain situations. They help coordinate human behavior in society. Now, there can be problems in trying to regulate human behavior. For example, sometimes norms and laws might be in conflict with one another. The thing you're legally allowed to do might be sort of socially taboo. Some examples, paying taxes. In some countries, there is a law that says you must pay your taxes. However, they're distrustful of the government, and there might be a norm that says, no, you don't do that. You don't give the government your money. So in that kind of situation where the norm is, don't trust the government, and the law says pay your taxes, it's not going to work. The government will have trouble enforcing that law because it violates the social norm of not trusting the government. In the United States, in the Jim Crow era, segregation was legally enforced. During the civil rights era, when civil rights laws were passed to try and eliminate segregation, there was a lot of resistance. Why? Because it contravened the social norm in the South, which was racial hierarchy and inequality. So despite federal law saying segregation is illegal, the norm persisted. Now in that case, over time, aggressive enforcement of the law was able to sort of gradually chip away at the social norm and reduce its influence. Same thing can be said about smoking. Used to be a norm, so smoking was allowed all the time. In the 90s and the 2000s, there were more and more laws that were passed to try and reduce the prevalence of smoking. And along with that were things like advocacy campaigns to try and reduce smoking through social pressure. So in that case, we had social norms and legal regimes that were both working to try and curb a behavior. The big takeaway here is that it's tough to enforce laws when they violate social norms. It's easier when the laws and the norms are aligned together. And that's often how legal codes evolve. They're often based on social norms. And so you will see examples where the laws and norms are aligned in society. So just to recap, lots of different ways of coordinating human interaction. The two sort of ones that we're talking about now are laws, which are formal and external, and then there are norms, informal and internal. Laws, you need an external actor like the police to enforce them. Norms, you rely on the community pressure to reinforce the behavior. Overall, when we put these things together, we call them institutions. The institutions are the set of formal and informal rules and constraints that guide human action.